Hello and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you're here today. I hope you had a great holiday and a happy new year. Happy New Year. The first rule of 2021 is we don't talk about 2020. Kind of like Fight Club, but maybe not so violent. I'm half kidding and half not. But it is time to put 2020 behind us and focus on how we can make 2020 a year of resolve to do better. That's my resolve, to do better. I am not disappointed in all of the things that I was able to accomplish last year, but I am looking forward to making this year a much brighter, happier, positive year. I am so excited to tee up my guest today. His name is Ahad Ghadimi. He is the managing director of Core Capital, an international advisory firm that helps companies transition to employee ownership. I have had the pleasure of knowing Ahad for several years now. I met him through YPO. We were actually forum mates, which we will talk about in the episode. Ahad loved forums so much that he created a company around it. So he's also the founder of Forums at Work, whose mission is to democratize the forum experience, which is a peer-to-peer experience sharing and support platform used by organizations such as YPO and EO. He has built his career around leading turnarounds of bankrupt businesses and family-owned enterprises transitioning to employee ownership. Most recently, he authored and published a book called Turnaround Artists. I had the pleasure of editing it for him. And it's a business fable based on a true story, his true story of his family business. And it guides readers on how to transform company culture through creating connections and sharing experiences. We talk about building a culture based on an ownership mindset, the value of employee ownership, and why forums are such a powerful way to improve work relationships and take your team to the next level. Hang tight, and I'll be right back with Ahad. All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm so excited to have Ahad on here. I told you all about him, and he's just an amazing human being. I'm so excited you get to meet him today. Thanks, Ahad, for coming on the show.
Well, I've been looking forward to this, and specifically looking forward to having this conversation with you. I adore you as a person and really as a leader, and you're one of the most authentic people I've really ever had as a peer. So this is great.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have so many things in common and so many threads that we can take this, but let's start with getting to know you a little bit. So can you tell us who you are and what you do in your own words, not mine?
Fair enough. So on the professional front, I've been a turnaround guy for the last almost a decade now, actually. I had my first taste of a turnaround, helping lead the turnaround of Boston Market, the rotisserie chicken chain. A lot of people are happy that place came back and stayed alive. And,
it's so delicious.
Especially the sides. I was talking to someone today about, I said Boston Market, they're like, oh my God, the spinach dip side. So so that was my first taste, no pun intended, of a turnaround, and I've been doing them since. So just been involved with businesses in massive transition, whether it's bankruptcy or succession, which is a sort of a really defining moment. It's funny because, with all the COVID stuff going on, I was talking to a friend who also leads turnarounds, and we're like, this is just kind of a normal day. Crisis has just kind of been part of our lives for the last 10 years. Leading these turnarounds. So, I've been in all types of different industries. So obviously restaurants, more recently manufacturing and e-commerce. I think the common thing is I've often been probably the person with the most authority and probably the least knowledge of the industry or the product or subject matter in the room. So nothing like that to really flare up your imposter syndrome.
And do you find that it matters? I mean, as you're doing a turnaround, does the industry really matter, or is it really like doing a deep dive into what's going wrong in the business?
It's a great question, and it's actually something I just wrote a little article about. In fact, there's an advantage of not knowing a lot about the industry and not knowing a lot of the product, and coming in fresh. Because I think, to your question, there's fundamental business principles. When you come in not knowing about fiberglass reinforced plastics or water filters or high-end guitars or industrial distribution, I find that I don't meddle too much. I don't tinker with the some of the things that are so detailed, and I really sort of one, it keeps me very open. I ask a lot of questions, obviously, because it's such a steep learning curve, and I think, amongst other things, that perspective gets everybody else really asking and reconsidering things, and not just accepting the typical way we do things. I'll give you an example. My first business was high fashion swimwear back in 2005. This was a startup, and so we started this high fashion swimsuit company. And it was me, a former Miss France, and her very wealthy husband, and who were the co-founders. And when we kicked off, my first question was, why is the inside of the swimsuit so ugly? These are women's swimsuits, so the sort of what do you call it, the inner lining, I'm like, that's like the most important part. Why is it so ugly inside? And we ended up putting all our design dollars on the inside. We put these, a snake or a butterfly on the inside of swimsuits, and we made Vogue in our first collection, and so, or we were selling our swimsuits we were selling the tops and bottoms separate. That the industry sold them together, a bikini top and a bikini bottom. I'm like, well, that makes no sense, because how do you know how a person's body? It's not a template. And so we actually revolutionized selling separates. So there's such a value of just, asking silly questions and being really new to an industry.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, because who would have thought? And now, I could never even imagine buying my swimsuit without trying on different tops and mixing and matching. So it is good to just be curious, because you never know what an outsider's view can bring to you.
Well, especially if you're the boss, right? Because you ask these questions, no one's going to tell you that's a dumb question. So they'll humor it enough to, well, that's actually a good question, and they'll sort of open it up. So yeah, I found that to be really important. I'm sort of leading a real estate roll-up right now, and one of the interesting things I found is actually the real estate companies that are the most successful are when the owner does not have a real estate license. The owner doesn't sell any real estate. Their job is to lead and grow the business. And the ones that are least successful are the ones who the owner is trying to sell homes or buildings, and then also trying to mentor and lead. The second part is just kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, well, I think it goes to that, great leaders know how to work on the business instead of in the business. And when you grow up in the business, it's really hard to separate yourself. So when I came on at Stone Age, I was young and dumb and had no idea how to run a business. I was 28 years old. And I think having an outside view with not a lot of bad business habits was really useful to the company. But now I find myself being an insider. I grew up with the company, so to speak. And so really challenging myself to start thinking like I haven't been in it for a decade and a half. And how do I have a learner's mind and really consider, new ways of doing things and new industries to be able to expand to, so I don't get stuck in this is how I've always done it. And I get stuck working in the business rather than on the business. So I think that that's a great point, and something that I don't think a lot of people necessarily value, right? Well, how can you be really great at this if you don't come from this? And that's just not true.
Yeah, no, I get it all the time. I'm curious, how do you do that? You're right. So you've been at Stone Age for, all this time, and you've grown up with the business. How do you sort of create that beginner's mind for yourself?
Well, I think part of it is who I am. I'm just naturally curious. So I am always exploring new ideas, and I'm definitely a growth-driven CEO, and I think that helps. But part of it is that I'm also a disruptive CEO. I've been disrupting our industry in lots of ways over the last 15 years. And so I think that helps when you're always looking for, how am I really going to change things? Well, you're not really going to change things and be disruptive if you're doing it the way that you've always done it. So I think it's partly who I am, but it's also partly the vision that I have for the company, and it's going to be very different. But not everybody has that, intrinsically. So, it's interesting to have to figure out how to dig deep. And I think a lot of founders really struggle with that. That's probably why you come in as a turnaround guy. How do you save a failing business, right?
Listen, the first thing I say is, often, and it's all because it's obvious. I say, I know nothing about this industry. I know nothing about this product. And so just imagine you're walking into a business that's got about maybe, I don't know, a couple months of cash left. Everything's a crisis. And here's the guy who's going to rescue, or in fact, it's obviously we do it together, but they're looking at you like, here's a solution. You say you don't know anything about the business. It really takes the air out of their room, but it actually puts everybody at ease because they realize we're not just hinging our future on this one person. We're going to have to all be in. We're going to have to all take ownership. And frankly, what we've been doing is obviously not working. So there's I'd say it's like an intrinsic humility that comes with this. And I think if that makes everybody else just it makes it easier for everybody else to be more humble and dare I say vulnerable to the fact that they don't have all the answers.
Yeah. Right? And to admit it's not working. But I'm sure you've probably faced resistance, right? Where, oh great, we have a turnaround guy coming in here and I don't really know that I want to listen to him. So how do you overcome that resistance that you might encounter?
Kerry, it's not some resistance. It's all resistance. I mean, it's like it's you. I can see it on people's faces. You sense it in the room, and I think you said the word intrinsically. I think for me, my intrinsic approach to this is, in a way, kind of not acknowledging it. I don't react to it. I don't resist. I actually accept it because I could really empathize where people are coming from. The plant operation manager who's 60 and has been at this company for 40 years, and going through, and so for him, I can understand for him, it's such a shock. And so for me, it's like, I see it as a process. I see this is, day one is just where we're starting, but week 3, we're going to be somewhere else. And if I could just move the needle on openness, trust, and I think that's my job actually to do that. These are the people who are on this sinking ship, and I mean it's all emotional. I mean, it's all, you've seen a third or 2/3 of the people laid off. It's looking really bad, and if you can, I love this concept of the eye of the storm. And so the eye of the storm is, you're in this moment where around you is just in this general vicinity is blue skies and birds chirping, but a little beyond that, there's hurricanes and tornadoes and it's madness. And I actually relish in that, and being that the calmest, most unreactive person, and it's contagious. I think when you show up, I've seen when I show up that way, people can't rationalize why they're a little more relaxed, and a little less stressed out. But people they sort of they level out, and they can start thinking a little more long term and a little more rationally, and that's how we start getting a little bit of traction, and we just build on that every day.
Yeah, I think that's great. So when I first met you, it was actually, I think it was our first YPO event for both of us. It was an 80s party. It was wild. And I knew immediately I was going to like you. I loved your chill vibe, but I also loved that you were doing turnarounds and doing it with employee ownership in mind. And as you know, I'm extremely passionate about employee ownership. And so I was immediately drawn to that. So how have you used the idea of employee equity, employee ownership, ESOPs in how you think about turnarounds, and how maybe you even actually do turn around the company?
I have fond memories of that of that YPO event. It was a rock and roll theme.
I was Cindy Lauper.
I was David Bowie. I mean, with orange, with an orange wig. We were quick friends.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I, for me, look, I'll tell you my first sort of encounters with employee ownership, and frankly, it had nothing to do with equity. You know, it had something to do with it with an emotional buy-in. It actually, the one of them was at Boston Market. You know, this, you know, our whole theme was go from surviving to thriving. The company had gone through a bankruptcy. McDonald's had bought it and sort of took in all the really good real estate and spat it back out. And a third of the people had been let go. And now the whole mandate was, let's create this sort of energy in this environment of not trying to just survive, but let's, you know, think about how we're going to thrive together. And so we did a whole bunch of innovation sessions. I remember there were some new regulations around to the pharmaceutical industry, and how companies can pharmaceuticals can sort of cater lunches for doctors and whatnot. So, and that was like 90% of our business. So that's gone out the window. And the whole idea was to get people to think new things and new ideas, and not try to think about how to go back to the old way. So we did a whole bunch of innovation sessions, and it was co-creative. It was about people really creating an open, safe environment and people co-creating the new ideas. And when you go through such a process, and if you can get people to really open up, you'll have an epiphany right there in the room, you know, almost on command. And I remember this is like 2011, and we came up with these ideas of home delivery and subscription catering, and I mean things that are just kind of commonplace now with like Grubhub and everything. But and I remember this idea came up, like the room went silent because everybody just felt it. But what was really interesting was, so, you know, Boston Market, I think we were 10,000 people at the company at the time. So, you know, mid-sized company. And the following weeks, so things kind of move slow when the company gets bigger, but people went back to their regions and people invested their own personal money on piloting these ideas. And that for me was the first time I experienced, you know, a bona fide employee becoming like an entrepreneur within a company. I mean, taking a risk and trying something because they're so passionate. And that's when this concept of, wow, an employee can be an owner, an employee can be like an entrepreneur. And how powerful would that be if that was sort of culture wide, and if you can really harness that. So I didn't know anything about the employee ownership world or community or ESOPs. I experienced this firsthand. And you know, and starting to dig into it, I'm like, oh, wait a second, there's this whole community out there, and there's a whole world of employee ownership. And you know, for me at the time, I thought like it just made all the sense. And I think like you, I think once you sort of experience it and you see people, especially employees, people have more sort of like an employee who've always been employees and have that sort of mindset and have an experience being an entrepreneur, to take that kind of ownership and commitment. I mean, it's like it's every CEO's dream for people on the payroll to just own it and think about it all day and night, like they are, you know. And I thought, well, and I had just idea that, of course, at the time, it's like 2011, 12, and you sort of read the headlines about baby boomers retiring and their kids don't want to take over their family businesses. I was one of them. I had nothing to do with my family's business. And so these businesses that don't have any succession plans, especially, you know, businesses that are, you know, do less than about 10 million in revenue. And so I thought, well, if we can convert these to ESOPs, and which all just the incredible benefits that an ESOP brings, but then transform their culture. At the time, it was an idea, it was a concept. They would probably be unstoppable. And that's how I got into it, with that idea. And, you know, 8-9 years later, and all the experiences I've had, it's actually far exceeded how powerful I think it is and how fast things work when you create the environment for and the support for people to think and act like owners, but then after give them the incentives like equity or profit sharing or whatnot, and a piece of the action.
Yeah, well, you are ahead of your time. As you know, I sit on Governor Polis's Employee Ownership Commission here in Colorado, and that's exactly what his mission is, we're seeing what they call that silver tsunami of baby boomers leaving their, needing to do something with their business and not having kids who either, want to not having kids at all or want to get into the business. And what do? You can't lose all of those jobs in these more mom and pop type organizations where a strategic buyout or private equity makes no sense, which many times that ruins companies anyway. So that was really I think a lot of foresight for you to see what was going to happen and to be able to start to work with companies on formulating ESOPs. So what was your first ESOP company?
So my first ESOP. So I think this distinction that I'll make is, so there's ESOPs, like the vehicle of an ESOP, and there's sort of creating employee ownership. So the first
There's lots of
time I
models.
quit,
I think that's a good point. There's lots of models. Yeah.
yeah, and I think a lot of people sort of look at ESOPs and they'll say, okay, well, does that work or not? And an ESOP is good for certain companies, a co-op is good for other companies. But I think the first ones was, Boston Market was the first time we started really creating a bit of like an ownership culture. The second one was a industrial distribution company in Canada. From there, it was a fiberglass manufacturing facility in Spartanburg, South Carolina, completely insolvent. I think when I started, we had about 130 employees, most of which were recruited right out of the prison system in South Carolina. So they were all ex-cons. I remember walking down the plant floor the first day, and they just kind of feeling like everybody was like, I was being watched, but no one was making eye contact. Like I felt like a prison warden. And I remember saying that to the HR director, and she's like, "Well, yeah, most people here are ex-cons," and I was like, "Wow, I didn't realize that." And but that was sort of another example of people who, listen, frankly, people, they're a group of people who people didn't really have a lot of faith in, care about. But once we started putting a lot of faith in them and taking care of them and fostering their growth, they're the most loyal people I've ever worked with. It was unbelievable. And it's funny because this company was losing, I think, $2 million a year, and it wasn't even a very big company. So, I mean, I had no indication of ever being able to sort of survive. And but once we sort of turned it around and succeeded, and we had this sort of great event, and one of these, there was this guy with like big huge beard and sort of real biker looking guy. He came up to me and said, "Listen, anybody messes with you, you let me know and I'll take care of them." And I think it was just his way of saying, you're okay with me now. You're sort of accepted here in the group. But
Mm-hmm. To your point on investing in people and then, giving them a platform to be their very best, I think that employee ownership is such a great, vehicle for doing that. Everybody, it doesn't matter where your background is, where you come from, like everybody wants to feel valued. Everybody wants to be included. Everyone wants to be able to provide for their families and understand that they have a growth path in an organization. And so, especially when you take people who, ex-convicts, for example, or, people who may not always be seen or heard in an organization, and say, hey, I'm going to share in the success and I care about your opinion and you're going to be part of this and your work matters, what you can do to turn it around. And so I love that story. I think it's so remarkable what you were able to do there, and being able to use a vehicle like sharing in the success of the company with everyone.
Just listening to you say that, it takes me back to my first a couple of weeks, and I remember I was pulling in people off the plant floor into the front office, which they basically rarely went into unless they're being reprimanded, frankly. And we started to come and sit in and I remember I brought in a sort of a whole line off the plant floor. There were 7 of them, and they're all, I mean, fiberglass is a messy business, so they're all dusty, and they're kind of looking at me like whether they should sit down on the nice leather chairs because they're so dirty. I'm like, yeah, sit down. And so we had this great conversation, and I just hearing you share that, it takes me back to like them looking at me like, cause I'm asking them questions. They're my resource, and I'm looking at them as a resource, and they're like, is this guy for real? And it was just this really amazing moment where they're like, oh, I've got something to share. I've got something to really offer here. And you're right. You know, when you offer that opportunity, when you just respect someone that way, it's unbelievable what comes out, both in terms of just the knowledge they have, that they don't even know how valuable it is, and that the level of commitment, loyalty, and and also just what it does for the way they feel, and the pride. I mean, I think, you know, further to what you were saying, I think fulfillment. I mean, what better feeling? People talk about happiness a lot, but I think the step beyond that is fulfillment. And if you can help people feel that way and feel fulfilled, like they've accomplished something, they've done something, and they've contributed, um, you've got an owner. And that's actually the one thing I tell people about employee ownership. They're like, so I get it. They're like, oh, so if you give people equity, they're going to become owners. I'm like, no, not at all. You have to make them feel part of it. The equity, the profit sharing, all of that, that's the incentive. But it's really how you make them feel and make them really uh, part of the success, and help them make a contribution. Um, that's where ownership happens.
I agree with you completely. So at Stone Age, our machine shop, the most awesome group of guys, and one gal, yay. And they came up with the own it mindset for Stone Age. And it was going to be it was really their team commitment, how we're going to show up and take care of our equipment, take care of each other to keep things picked up. And I loved it. It was so fantastic. And so we went through this exercise where each team came up with their own own it mindset. And the next thing you know, it morphed into the Stone Age own it mindset, which is the set of behaviors that we all operate on. And it's how we help onboard new employees to understand you need to be able to exhibit these to be successful here. And we will help you on that journey. And our machine shop, they exhibit so much pride because they came up with this. And you know, it's all over our building, it's talked about in our industry, and they are one of the strongest teams that we have in the organization, and I adore them. They work together so well, and they're so creative and new ideas. And they really, I think, did solidified our culture with this little idea that they had that turned into something much bigger. And they owned it. I mean, that's what they did. They said, there are some things we need to change, and here's how we're going to change it. And we're going to all agree to this and commit to it. So I think you're spot on when you talk about, you know, the financial piece of it is just the incentive. But if you don't create the culture and the feeling that we're in this together and I care about what you think and you can change this business just as much as I can change this business, then you really are going to fail to, I don't know, leverage what you can get out of your benefits package, whether it is an ESOP or something as simple as profit sharing.
And what's that like for you, Kerry, as the CEO, when this value, it's a value, right? Owning it is a value, and that comes from the machine shop, and people are essentially indoctrinating new employees, or employee owners in your case, with this mindset. It didn't come from you, it came from them, and they're doing that. What's that like for you as an owner?
Love it. I love it. It's so great. I mean, our success is 100% because of the amazing teamwork that we have. Our customers come to our facility and say, "Can I get a job here? I mean, I want to work for you guys, for you." And you can't create that from the top down. That comes from, you know, from every aspect of or every department of the organization. And so It fills me with a tremendous amount of pride. In fact, I'll show you. All of our listeners can't see our video, but I even have the Own It Mindset sweatshirt on.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Our one team Own It Mindset sweatshirt, you know, that this is literally perforating, and I wear it proudly because it is so rewarding to have people buy into it.
Are you familiar with the Gallup 12 questionnaire?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? It's like these 12 questions that really determine employee engagement. And they've interviewed, I think, 35 million employees. And one of the biggest elements of this is, am I making a contribution? Of the 12 questions, I think a few of them around, am I making a contribution, and do I fit in? And am I growing? Those are the 3 of the 4. And the 4th one, I think, is I know what my job is and I have the tools to do it. So it's just, just hearing your story and just this whole notion of creating an ownership culture, it's so infectious. And that's, I can relate with customers wanting to, people just seeing that they want to be a part of it. But what they want to be a part of is they want to fit in somewhere. They want to feel like they're contributing. It's interesting, these are fundamental human things. I mean, nobody has to look any further than themselves and realize, I want to fit in where I am. I want to feel like I'm making a contribution. I want to feel like I'm growing. When I do those 3 things, I feel great. I feel fulfilled. And I think that's what employee ownership done right, assuming that it's comprehensive with, the incentives and the environment, create for everybody.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's talk culture, but go at it from a different angle. So you just finished a book, which I had the pleasure of editing for you, Turnaround Artists, and really getting this idea of forums at work, which is not just a YPO thing, but something that we do a lot in YPO. So could you describe, first of all, what a forum is and where forums at work and Turnaround Artists is coming into play into your business and how you're trying to help build engagement within companies?
So forums is, the YPO forum is a setting where 6 to 8, 9 peers get together. They make a vow to keep everything they talk about confidential. They make a vow to not give advice, but to just share experiences. And then also this notion of top 5%, bottom 5%. So just to share what's the best things that are going on for you, and really the worst. And when I joined YPO, look, I remember I had the conversation with the membership officer, Tyler, at the time, and he said to me, he goes, the first thing he said to me at breakfast that morning, he said, YPO is all about vulnerability. And I was like, that was not what I was expecting. I thought it was just like, I don't know, a bunch of really successful people doing really cool things and going on really cool trips and kind of a social club. And I said, what do you even... to be honest, I didn't even really know what vulnerability meant, frankly. I mean, I thought, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, so does that mean you just complain more? And, think like a lot of our peers, I'm an A type and, work harder, do more and give it your all. And I didn't really understand what vulnerability meant and what that looked like. And of course, you were my first forum mate, you and our 5 other forum mates. And it was just such a feeling of relief just to be able to share my challenges and the things that I was working through, and to realize that, wow, first of all, I'm not alone. Second of all, I'm probably being a lot harder on myself than I need to be. Third of all, maybe I am doing pretty well. It's that inner critic. And believe me, I just wrote a book, so I know all about the inner critic. It is so pervasive and can really just quash your energy. So I just got so much out of that experience, and it was just such an energy boost. And of course, you realize everybody is going through these challenges, and so for me, my biggest thing was, well, how do we share this, and how do we make this more available? And I like the word you used earlier, democratize this for more people, because these are human emotions and human challenges. So I've adapted it. I've adapted this process in a way that, look, in our YPO forums, we talk about our personal issues, our family issues, our business issues, and everything's on the table. Um, in the working environment, you don't want to talk about the fight you had with your spouse at the breakfast table, or maybe a diagnosis of an illness. You may not want to bring those things up, but there's a lot of other things that you can really share about yourself, about who you are, about what you're dealing with, especially at work, that helps others really empathize and understand that, wow, just like them, you are struggling in some areas and need support. And an incredible thing happens when people empathize, is when someone can empathize with you because they know what you're going through, all of a sudden judgment goes out the window, because someone knows in their mind that, wow, I can relate. I actually feel that way right now. Or I felt that way, or and obviously that feels good, but it takes away the friction and the resistance that creates conflicts, and prevents the kind of teamwork you were just talking about, at Stone Age. And so there's this conversation about being vulnerable and open and authentic, but it's like, how do you actually do that in the workplace? There's where there's this precedent of being professional and stoic and all these things, and so that's really what my book was about. It was really I tell a story about bringing this level of authenticity, vulnerability in the process, to create this as a sort of scalable culture in a family restaurant business, which it actually happens to be a true story about when I had to reluctantly take over my family's business when my father had a pretty bad accident, and had to sort of work through the culture that he had created. He created a very successful company, but it's centered on him. And the moment he had an accident and he was out, the place was in chaos. And I want to create an ownership culture, a culture of empathy and connection. And so again, you hear about this a lot, but how do you actually do that? And so my goal with my book was to give people, make the reader kind of like a fly on the wall, where you can watch a team go through this, complete with the challenges and the friction that comes up with it, but given you go through this process, what you can expect on the at the end of it.
It's great. It's so real, and such a great model for how to do forums at work. But it's interesting in your book, and what I experience at Stone Age and other groups I'm part of, is that you can't leave the personal stuff at home, and the personal stuff does come out. And so I think it's really important to understand that while you need to have like your work self and your and your personal life self, they are intertwined, and you've got to be able to communicate about what's going on so that you can create this empathy for not just what's happening at work, but there's stuff outside of work that's happening that I can't help but bring in, even if I don't talk about it. It still is affecting me. So, how do you suggest that people, get that kind of vulnerability on the table, especially when you're not a really open person and comfortable with sharing?
Um, so you're spot on. I mean, you're there's not like a professional side of you and a business, a personal side of you. I mean, you're a person, and there you are. When you show up, you bring everything with you. And so your question is, how do you straddle that, and how you bring that? Look, I just did a GCC with 300 YPRs on this topic, and that was the number one question that just came up. And look, I think the simple, or the short answer is step by step. You're not going to. You've got your culture where it's at today in terms of how open or not open people are, and you want to move the needle, and you want to do it in a way that is comfortable. It's not too much. Doesn't You don't want to share so much. It doesn't too much information where you can't look at the person in the eye the next day. That's a real thing, right? And I think I've connected with leaders who who've had this desire to create an authentic culture and have gone too far, actually. And they're like, we have to let the person go. And it was really awkward, and we're worried about repercussions because maybe they think it's because of what they told us. So the answer is a step by step. And I think taking little steps of opening up and kind of curating this process. What we've done is, my process, we just start off with a conversation of what kind of culture do we want here? People share about, what's valuable. When have you had a great culture? And they share about, so they're trying to share experiences about things that are meaningful to them. And having these prompts and these type of questions with a certain parameter, like what kind of culture do you want? What are you grateful for in your life? What does leadership mean to you? It allows people to share. It gives them a parameter to share within. And then people can choose how much they want to share and how much they don't want to share. And when you do this in small groups, like a forum group within a company of people with a similar rank, 6-7 people, and you start off the meeting by saying, look, we're going to commit to keeping everything we talk about here between us. That's how we're going to really be open up. And you start with what I call softballs, easy topics like, what are you grateful for? People can gauge how comfortable they are to open up and share. And in my experience, people go step by step, and they open up a little bit, and and then they see what happens. And people kind of kept it within them, and people listened, and they connected. You could feel these things. Next time they're going to share a little more. Mm-hmm. So, the three things I would say is, one, the groups you put together, it's so important for them to be of a similar, especially to start, the similar rank and seniority and role. That just helps people respect each other and relate. That's one. Two, establishing like protocols like we do in our YPO forums. Everything's confidential. Let's just be authentic. And nobody wants advice, unless they ask for it. Share your experience. And when someone shares their experience, you can relate. You can say, wow, I'm not the only one going through this challenge. You've gone through it too. I'm not alone. That's what goes on in someone's mind. And then the next thing is cadence. If you have one conversation once and never have another one again, okay, you have a little blip, people open up a little bit, and that'll be the end of it. Kind of like what happens on like full day retreats. There's kind of a high by the end of the day, but you do it once a year and that's it. And so what I've done is I do them at a regular interval, even once a week for 30 minutes, but it helps sort of work that muscle and gets people increasingly comfortable, and trust is built over time. So that's what I would suggest, and don't force it. When people feel comfortable, they'll open up. But think about what I've just described is essentially creating the conditions where someone can open up, at their own time.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love the farm experience. I love it. Making deep connections is something that's so important to me. And I've definitely gone, like your example, maybe too far, where all of a sudden I know things that I don't want to know about my employees. And like, oh God, what am I going to do here? And so finding that balance is really important. But being able to connect with your peers and with leadership is so incredibly engaging and rewarding if done right. So I really applaud what you're doing with Forums at Work and your book, The Turnaround Artist, so that it can help people figure out how to be able to talk about these things that matter at work, where most people just are not that good at
it. And you just said the key word there is figure it out. I mean, where have we learned this? It wasn't in business school, it wasn't in finance class, it wasn't in high school. At no point have we been given any direction or guidance, or maybe you got lucky enough to have a mentor. I was actually at Dan, and I had a mentor named Thierry Bonetto who helped me understand what that balance is. But that's kind of like winning the lottery. It only happens for some people. So I think it's normal not to understand. And I think it's actually really humbling, Kerry. I'll tell you, right before this this YPO event, all the various questions I got, and hearing them made me realize, wow, like even incredibly successful leaders really grapple with, like, very practically, how do you apply this, and how do you find that balance? And so it is a practice. And to your point, um, sometimes it goes a little too much, but that's okay. We're kind of learning this together, but it's being on that right trajectory and making this an important value is, I think, what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. All right, well, I have two more questions that I want to ask you as we wrap things up. So it's going to change directions a little bit. So the name of my podcast is Reflect Forward, which has a lot of meanings to me. What does Reflect Forward mean to you?
It's funny. I thought about this actually before the meeting, particularly because it's a bit of a juxtaposition, because you reflect and you look backwards, but then what are you going to do forward? And this I think what's great about this interview and this conversation is that it actually makes me think about the things that I've done and then how I want to leverage it moving forward. And that's what it means for me. And what it Reflect Forward means to me is, look, 10 years ago I had this idea, this concept that by creating culture of employee ownership and incentivizing people, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be super successful faster than we even realize it. And when I'm on my rocking chair, when I'm 90 years old, I'm going to look back. I'm just going to feel really great in my heart. I'm going to feel like I really made an impact on a lot of people's lives. And so 10 years later, I just know these things are real. These things work. These things are more successful than I realize. And so my forward part is, how do I just reach the maximum number of people with this and help the maximum number of people with some of the topics we talked about, before I get to that rocking chair when I'm 90.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Ahad. Beautiful. All right. And Reflect Forward is all about helping leaders get to the very top of their game. So if you had one piece of advice on what leaders should do to be at the top of their game, what is that nugget of wisdom for us?
I think it's defining what top of your game means. And I think often that's like an intellectual exercise. So it might be a digit, a number, an exit value. But I think as you've probably seen with a lot of like peers who have big exits, and it's often not very fulfilling. So I think it's really like, what makes you feel really great? That's actually a very simple exercise everybody can look at. What are the things that make you feel really great? What are the things that give you that sense of that's where top of your game means for me, is that makes you feel awesome, that makes you feel proud and fulfilled. And how do you do more of that before you get to your rocking chair, so you have nothing to regret and you have a lot of positive things to reflect on? I think I'll leave you with one thing. I met a very inspiring business owner recently. His name is Larry Kendall. He created the group in Fort Collins, a real estate agency. It's 50 years old or something, and before even ESOPs existed. And he made it employee owned. And there's one thing he said that just really stuck with me, and it was the way he said it. He said, "I'm really satisfied with my career." He sold his company to his employees. He changed so many people's lives, create a lot of wealth for himself and other people, and he was just so at peace and happy. And that's what I strive towards, and I hope for everyone, including everyone listening to this podcast.
That's awesome. So good. So good. All right. So how can people find you, including the turnaround artists? And if they want to sign up for your course or hire you and your team to come in and help them with forms of work?
There's various different ways you can buy my book on Amazon. You can sign up for the course, which you can find at forums@work.com, and to run it yourself. If you need more help, our team can help you, guide you through it. So I think those are three really great ways, kind of depending where you're at in your journey, to apply and implement this, and actually realize that creating a really fulfilling and successful workplace is actually a lot more accessible than a lot of people realize.
All right. Well, Ahad, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. You're such an inspiring person, and
Mm.
I agree with everybody who runs in or comes into contact with you. Is that you just have this really calming effect. You're have such a chill vibe, and it's so refreshing, especially to like people like me that I'm like, constantly intense. And I appreciate you so much. So thank you for coming on the show today.
The feeling is mutual. I've this has been something I've been looking forward to. Just spending time with you, I always look forward to. So, and I really appreciate you saying that. So, I'm glad to be living my passion, and yeah, thanks for taking this time together.
And it's obvious that you are living your passion. It's inspiring. So
Thank you.
more of us need to aspire to be like you. All right.
Thanks,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, hang tight and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Ahad is such a fun person, and I had a blast chatting with him, especially about things that are so near and dear to my heart, like creating a great culture and employee ownership. Okay, so my question today isn't really a question. It's more of a reflection on a conversation I had with my son recently. I have an 8-year-old son named Jack, and he is on the freestyle ski team. Freestyle is where you do the bumps and the jump. And I was taking to him to practice, and he says to me, "Mom, I don't really want to go to ski team today." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Because I'm not perfect. I don't do my jumps perfect, and it makes me not want to go. I want to do them perfect." And I said, "Well, Jack, you have to practice to get perfect." And I was blown away by it. He's 8 years old. Who is pressuring him to do things perfectly? And I started to ponder, where does this pursuit of perfection come from? And why do we feel it at the age of 8 and carry it into adulthood? So Jack and I had a conversation about practice, the value of practice, and how when you practice things that you're not good at, you become good at them. But there's always something harder to do. So you have to love to practice and push yourself and try hard things and never pursue perfection, because there is no such thing, because there will be always something that you can do better. So take skiing, for example. When you start to learn how to ski, you fall a lot. It's hard. Next thing you know, you can do blue runs and then black runs. You can join the ski team. When you learn how to jump, you maybe do a spread eagle. Then maybe you do a 180, and then you practice some more. And then you do a 360, and you practice some more, and you do a 540. And all of those practices build upon each other to make you really great at something, but there's always something additional to pursue. So rather than pursuing perfection, pursue practice. Practice, practice, practice. That is what makes us better at things. If you pursue perfection, you might not show your imperfect work. And people around the world will not get to see what you are made of and what you can create. If you are in the pursuit of perfection, maybe you don't do hard things. If I can't do it perfectly, why would I bother? It will drive you crazy because it's so hard to achieve perfection. And whose standard of perfection are you trying to reach? What definition of perfect are you trying to reach? It's really a pointless and maybe even, I don't know, a fantasy to say that we can do something perfect. It doesn't mean that you don't try hard. It doesn't mean that you don't pursue quality and put in the work effort to do things really well, but do the practice and love the practice and make the practice the journey, not the end game. It will make your life so much better. And it will open the door to so many different opportunities because you won't be afraid to try hard things. You'll be more willing to push outside your comfort zone. And when you're outside your comfort zone, that's where the good stuff happens. That's when you realize that you can do more than you're capable of ever doing. So pursue the practice, not the perfection. I hope that helps. It's inspiring today. I'm certainly going to be working with my son on it and looking at myself and understanding when am I trying to pursue perfection rather than appreciating the practice. Take care. Look forward to hosting you again on the next episode of Reflect Forward.